Are we already saluting? Okay, we're already saluting. Welcome, Wednesday. Let's talk Broncos. Joey Richards, Zach Seegers, Bree Maestas, and we're back at it again with another positional overview here for the Denver Broncos going into the 2024 season. If you didn't already read the tight end breakdown over on letstalkbroncos.com, you can go over and see that. Now it's a little dated, but it still covers, there's no new movement. So you can go check out the 4 front runners there for that position. But I love the title of today's episode, because I think it's really appropriate when you consider that the Denver Broncos running back unit is super strong, but it's not a household name, and the competition is wide open. What I thought was interesting, though, Monday, Zach, is that you said the running back core group in itself was the strongest unit on the Denver Broncos, or you'd make an argument for that circumstance. I'm going to challenge that tonight, because I don't know if that's necessarily true. There's no clear starter. Javonte Williams and Samaje Perine aren't even guaranteed to be on the team long term. I think Perine could be a bubble. And I think Williams, if he fails to return to form, could struggle to make the team or could be a trade candidate moving into the season. So I want you to start off the conversation. We're going to jump right into it. We're not going to sugarcoat it. Give me what you meant by that, and then tell me I'm dead wrong if you don't agree with what I just said.
Oh, gladly, any time. Hey, this is Let's Talk Broncos after all. Yeah, I would disagree. I think you bring up good points, though. Like, there are big questions around Javonte Williams, who is even going to make the roster, who the starter even is. I would say that's largely a product, and it's all true, also largely a product of this being one of the only Broncos positions with like real depth, top to bottom. Yes, Javonte Williams or Samaje Perine might be cut. That's because there's 4 other guys in the backfield they probably want to give roster spots to, if we're counting Michael Burton. And then it's really hard to keep 5. They might even like Blake Watson. We don't even know what Blake Watson is, but there's some people really excited about that. Maybe he's good. And I don't think that's the case of any other position group on the team. Like, big fan of Patrick Surtain, but and even Jaquan McMillan, but we don't know a thing about the other cornerback in that room, or I think the cornerback's behind whoever cornerback 3 is. Though I think like cornerback's also in consideration. That's why I would take running back over that one. I don't think receiver has the same level of depth, though maybe that's in the conversation. Tackle, I don't think has the same level of depth. Maybe that's in the conversation. Guard, same thing. For me, it's really the depth. And then I think it could be really, really talented. It's not that rare we see a rookie back come in and be really good. Kareem Hunt, of course, came in as I think a 4th round pick, I'm pretty sure. And year 1 was the top 5 back in the league. Not that that's standard, but I think Estime could easily come in and be a solid down-to-down back, especially with, I think, the offensive line he's going to be given. Javonte Williams, I don't disagree, but while there's a very healthy chance he doesn't look like himself, I do think there's a healthy chance that a year extra removed from this crazy horrific injury. 12 months ago, we were on this show talking about how amazing it would be that he's apparently going to be ready to go for the first practice of training camp. This is amazing. That now 12 months removed from that, maybe we do get a better Javonte Williams this year. And I think the only time Javonte Williams really tanked down the stretch or looked rough, like the whole year wasn't great, but I only think it got rough the final few weeks of the season, which I think makes sense for a guy that didn't have a full off season to like get fully in shape, and then is also coming off a debilitating injury. I'm hopeful it's at least another step in the right direction. And if, Javonte Williams is a B back now instead of a C+, and Jaleel McLaughlin, who I didn't even touch on, I think he's going to be limited into a certain role for his career, but I think he could be great within that role. Not to say he'll be Darren Sproles, but we saw Darren Sproles in a Sean Payton offense be extremely valuable in that same kind of niche. I think Jaleel McLaughlin could, that's the high end, but I think he could potentially recreate that, or at least give you, 80% of that, which is something. And I just don't think you can say that about any other position group on the roster. So that would be my defense. Though I do think you bring up very real critiques. I think at the end of the day, it's just a problem with the Broncos roster.
Yes. Here is my critique of the Broncos having the most depth at running back. While I agree with you, I think that's true. I also think that if you were to look at a lot of teams in the NFL, they would have the most depth at running back because running back is easy to find. That would be my only thing, is just like there's a reason why they don't have offensive tackle depth and they do have running back depth. And it's because offensive tackle's really hard to find. It's hard to improve at offensive tackle, while as running back, the less you play, almost the better. It's just differences. I think a lot of teams, their best, they would say, quote unquote, our best would be running back depth. I think depth at damn near any other position on the football field is harder to find. It's without question that they do have good running backs and guys that can fill in. It's just I've seen too many times in an NFL season where you can have an undrafted free agent come in and be okay for you at running back. That's something you couldn't ever even think about at the majority of positions in the NFL. So, yeah, I agree. But also at the same time, it's like, well, what does that really mean? Like, does that matter much? Because I think they could do without Samaje Perine, Jaleel McLaughlin, and some of these other guys and find other running backs that can do kind of what they do a little bit. They're niche running backs, and I don't think niche running backs are too hard to find.
So are you guys in support then of the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton going off of the, I guess, rotational edge that they're doing now? Like, you don't have a household lead running back who's going to cost you millions of dollars, who's going to carry your quarterback in the offense moving forward, but instead it's more of a plug and play. They'll still be able to have depth at the position, although I will caution that some of it is unproven depth. So I think maybe it's there, but we don't know yet. So you guys are in favor of what the Broncos are presently doing with the running back room as it currently stands? If they move off of Williams, I could see that does save them some money down the line. Then they would just draft a running back, or they'd find, like you said, one out of the herd. But if you get rid of Perine, that's $3 million against the cap. And do you see them going in that model moving forward? And how does that help Bo Nix, if assuming he's the starter?
Because I don't think the running game is going to be a product of the running back necessarily. Generally speaking, I think the offensive line has more to do with it. Now, my stance on paying running backs has evolved some. I do think there are running backs that are worth paying. I don't think the Titans regret paying Derrick Henry one bit. I don't think even with the injury, I don't think the Browns necessarily regret paying Nick Chubb. I don't think the Niners regret paying Christian exactly. Now, one that I think is interesting: who is the most financially savvy, ahead of it team out there? Like the quarterback thing I was talking about these past couple of weeks. The first team to that was the Eagles, because of how they've been doing these options and stuff. I think they're the first team to this new thing, which is running backs have become too devalued. And so what did they do this offseason? They went out and actually spent a good bit of money on a super talented running back. And so I do think there's a crop of 3 to 5 guys. It might be more than that if you list it out on paper, but a small handful that are worth really paying to long-term and committing, because just they fundamentally change your offense. If you don't and keep drafting in the mid rounds, and maybe you find one. I think Javonte Williams could have been one of those guys if not for the injury. Keep trying, and maybe you end up finding them. Until you do, keep drafting the Audric Estimes of the world. Keep just building out a rotational backfield. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think you want guys that are too niche, where it's like a tell, like Philip Lindsay. You knew he was running the ball because he couldn't pass protect and he wasn't that great a receiver. So if he was out there, he was a bit of a tendency tell. Jaleel McLaughlin, I think, stays out of that because he can be an effective runner and receiver. I don't think the pass protection's there, but he's at least not the same tell that Philip Lindsay was. So I think as long as you don't have those really obvious tells, and I don't think Javonte Williams is that. Audric Estime, we need to see something from him in the pass game in the NFL, but I don't think he'll be that. I think that's a good model. You can find a lot of production that way and keep these guys fresh. Running back is a brutal position to play. You take a lot of freaking hits at it. I think it's good to keep these guys fresh and you have like 3 backs you trust touching the ball.
Yes. So here's my thing on the Jaleel McLaughlin thing, and I've been thinking about this recently, and I'm curious what your guys' opinion are on this one. I would rather have a really good blocker than a good receiving running back. And I think that Jaleel McLaughlin is still a tell because he's only just good at receiving. I think that tier where it's not a tell is held for the elites. It's for the Alvin Kamaras. It's for those type of running backs. I think it's much more valuable to have a guy that's in there to block, and it makes it less of a tell. I think Jaleel McLaughlin's still a tell because what he kind of is a check down. What we saw last year, it was a check down, and that's what we consider a good receiving running back. I don't know. I kind of hold that standard up higher. When I'm talking about good receiving running backs, I'm talking about Alvin Kamara. I'm talking about Christian McCaffrey. I'm talking about those types, right? Whereas there's just more really good run blocking or really good blocking running backs like that are in that really good tier. I don't know. A check down type guy isn't getting it done for me in the tell area. It's not.
I don't think he's just a check down artist. I don't think he's just a check down artist.
You think he's running complex routes out there?
Are you talking Estime?
I'm talking about Jaleel. You think he's running? You saw last year him running complex routes.
Yeah, he's running choice routes. He's running choice routes out there.
What were I mean, maybe that's something I need to go back and look at. I don't remember Jaleel being
that mid part of the season. He kind of started filling the joker role for the Broncos in the offense. Now, granted, they quickly realized we can't be giving this guy 40 snaps a game. His body can't take it. We need to drop it back down to like 20. But I disagree. I think they were asking a good bit of him in the pass game. I also don't think he's a check down artist because you saw them running designer plays for Jaleel McLaughlin throughout the season that were clearly.
Yes, that's not what that means. That's not what that means, though. Like, yes, you can go out there and catch a screen, but I think damn near anybody can go out there and catch a screen. I'm talking about routes. Like, that's what separates from the Alvin Kamaras, the Christian McCaffreys, and other.
You don't have to be an all-pro to be a valuable receiving back.
What was that?
You don't have to be an all-pro to be a valuable receiving back.
I'm not talking about the talented player. I'm talking about the level of receiving back. Like, I don't think Jaleel's up there with those guys at all as a receiver.
No, not at all. But I don't think he has to be like a good part of this offense. Like, I think Tariq Cohen, like, again, it was very short-lived, but Tariq Cohen was a nice piece in the Bears offense for a couple of years in a small niche. That's like I don't want to go to like the Darren Sproles case because that's such like a high-end argument. Like, we could even go to Phillip Lindsay. I think Phillip Lindsay was an inferior player to Jaleel McLaughlin, and you saw how valuable he was for the Broncos for 2 seasons. And he had none of the receiving ability that McLaughlin has. I don't think he's McCaffrey, but I also think he's the most dynamic receiver on the Broncos. I think P. Ryan's probably the best receiving back, but I think McLaughlin's the most dynamic by a good bit.
Yeah, I just want to clarify my argument. It's not that I think he has to be an all-pro or something like that. My argument here is that he's not like – I think it's a lot easier and it's a lot more effective to find a good blocking running back. When I look at the good blocking running backs, there's a lot of really good ones out there. When I look at just purely receiving ability, which takes away that tell part, and that's what I'm talking about here, the tell. There are not many that are up to tier with some of the elite receiving running backs in the NFL. Austin Eckler, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, these are the types I'm talking about. And Jaleel McLaughlin is nowhere near to me that type of receiver. He's nowhere near, in my opinion, which still makes him a tell. That's my argument. I think, yes, his receiving ability is cool, but I think there's a lot of cool, and that doesn't take away that he's a tell. He's still a tell because I don't think he's running many complex routes or beating people that like what did he do?
I think he's the Joker
run?
in this offense. I fundamentally disagree. I think you saw him. Frankie commented running like a good number of choice routes in this. I think he was Pirine was, but behind Pirine, I think he was running had the like second most complex route tree of any back on the Broncos. That might be.
Pirine wasn't running a complex route. He was a check down.
No, he was just a check down.
These guys.
Well, and I think, Joey, your initial conversation too, your question was, would you rather A, blocking ability or receiving ability? So the initial conversation wasn't necessarily whether or not there was an inability for Julian McLaughlin to do what you're asking here. And I think your definitions differ, which is why we're seeing the back and forth. Sorry, Zach, I was talking and then I don't know if you said something. But I just wanted to point out that your definition, Zach, I want you to answer the initial question too of which would you prefer out of a running back? Maybe take the principle and or the character out of the conversation. Because in one notion, I see the smash mouth ability to be a good blocker, and then everything else kind of falls into place after that if you're not really relying on your running back in order to facilitate, like you said, a check down. But there's the tell aspect of it I want you to talk more of, Joey. But Zach, go ahead and give me that answer for Joey's initial question.
My bad. I didn't fully understand the point there. That's what I was saying. Just saying. My bad. As for that initial point, I think it's tough. I think long term, I would bet on, because I think the Broncos kind of have a good example of this. Like I would bet on an Audric Estime. Because I think you can make him serviceable in the pass game, and he's money pass protector. And also when I talk about Julian McLaughlin, I think he can be an awesome side dish in this running back room. By no means am I saying he's more than Darren Sproles is the highest of high end comps I think you could give him. And Darren Sproles was always just a premium side dish. Now in a vacuum, like for just 1 year, I think I'd rather have the guy. And I think I also disagree with Joey on like how good of a receiver McLaughlin is, but I'd rather have the guy with like who's a dynamic receiver. I think it's easier to game up the pass protector stuff. We saw this some last year. I think they're taking it from the college game, but where they're taking the running back and they're just like, who cares if they know he's going to block? And they're like putting him up between the guard and the tackle to just like kind of situate him a little better in the backfield to block. And kind of covering up poor blocking that way, which it shouldn't be that surprising because we just saw the NFL do something very similar with poor blocking tight ends that were coming out of college. So I think that's a lot easier to get, like, good pass protection. I think is easier to game up than good receiving ability. That said, I don't think that really applies to Julian McLaughlin because I don't think he's ever gonna, I hope I'm wrong here. Maybe he like adds some real like strength to his lower body and is able to become a good pass protector, but I don't think he's ever going to be like, even like average in that area. Right. Well, I think Estime could easily become an average receiving back. And I think he's probably going to step into the league as like a average to above pass protector.
Yes. And that's mostly my point. I think here it's just, that I think for Jaleel to become a player that's not a tell, he needs to become elite in that area, and I don't think he is elite. And I mean, it's just as simple as this. If I were to ask everybody and take a poll, and they were like, who's more likely to be less of a tell, and they both are on completely different spectrums, right? We haven't seen Audric Estime catch the ball out of the backfield ever in his career so far. We haven't seen Jaleel McLaughlin be a successful pass blocker ever in his NFL career so far. But if I were to take a poll and be like, who's going to be less of a tell in the NFL at a point, it would probably be Audric Estime because all I need for him is to be average in the receiving game, just be check down dude sometimes, and that'll work. Whereas with Jaleel McLaughlin, he just has physical incapabilities to be a blocker, a pass blocker. And I think there's a lot of that. I think always he's going to be kind of a tell. And it's just whether he makes that up with elite ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. That's kind of my take there. But I want to move on. I want to get off of this.
Oh, okay. Well, since Joey voted so, I guess we're going to. But I didn't get a grade from you guys. Frankie Abbott's in the chat saying they have 3 to 4 guys that can sit in the backfield to block. I don't think that they need that from Jaleel. Frankie, thanks for tuning in. Just kidding. Hi, buddy. Let's Talk Broncos contributor, Frankie Abbott. Go follow him over on Twitter. I need a grade from you guys. I'm going because there's a lot of unproven. I know there's like a anticipated speculative ceiling, or I guess floor for what we would anticipate from certain individuals. I'm still going like a C. I don't feel comfortable with where the roster is. I think it's fine, but I mean, PFF has them ranked as the 4th worst. I know they have an opportunity to prove that wrong, and there's probably a really large gap in which they can make that up if all things go ideally. I just don't see that happening here. I feel like C is warranted because there's a lot of like we don't yet know. Interestingly enough, is Tyler Beatty still floating around out there? Give me your answer and give me your grade. Zach, first over to you.
I feel like it's B+. I think it's a solid running back room. Maybe that's being maybe it's more like a B. I'm viewing it a glass half full here. Because I think I probably just view Jaleel McLaughlin fundamentally different. I think he's a dynamic player. I don't think I'll factor this into my point here to put it on it. I don't think he is a tell because he can impact the run game very nicely. I think at an above average level, and he can impact the pass game at an above average level as a receiver. And so I think if you can impact both those things, you're not a giveaway as whether or not it's a run call or a pass call. So I think he's a dynamic player. He impacts both facets of the game, even if he's not pass protecting.
Okay, fair enough. I will say that we all were calling Jaleel McLaughlin a tell last year, so that would mean he has to improve somewhere. I don't know what we're talking about. We've all been here on this podcast talking about Jaleel McLaughlin's a tell at one point or another.
I was using the same comparison with Philip Lindsay back in October. This is not true. You might have been saying that. I was not.
Okay, well, if you weren't, I definitely was. I was saying Jaleel McLaughlin was a tell this last year.
Check.
Anyways,
what's your grade?
Anyway, my grade, I'm right in line with you, Bree. It's a C, and I'm going to tell you the reason why. It's because the only thing that really matters in the running back room, and I don't know why I didn't get to this earlier. We had a whole conversation about Jaleel McLaughlin, and I didn't get to the main important part. Who's the 1A? And do I have trust in the 1A? No. That's what matters. I need the Broncos having a really good running back, and I'm not confident that the Broncos have a really good running back right now. Javonte, I hope he can. I have hope. I do have hope. Last year wasn't great, but I do have hope he can. And then maybe Estime can be that guy as an elite runner, right? But they don't have a great runner on this team. As it stands right now, what I know, they don't. So I'm going to go C, right in line with Bree. The depth is cool, but I need the Broncos to have like a 1A dude.
Joey, I don't even want the 1A. I want the 3-headed monster. I want what the Detroit Lions have. I want something that we were promised, and that's a ground attack with a bunch of heavy hitting, running the ball and making that an emphasis of this offense. I just don't see it right now, and I think your 1A question is appropriate for that. What's up, Zach?
What did David Montgomery look like behind the Bears offensive line? And then what do you look like behind the best offensive line in the sport, which I think the Broncos are trending towards? I think the Broncos have a great offensive line. I don't have a whole lot of gripe there in that capacity. So why isn't it working?
They had a great
I think a lot of that's some quarterback bullshit too. So maybe that'll change this season because Sean Payton's supposed to be a freaking mastermind. So show me some freaking mastermind work. That's all I'm asking for.
I think that's fair.
They had a great one last year.
You need that true 1A back, like the number 2 running game in the NFL, the Baltimore Ravens, the number 3 rushing attack in the NFL, the Bills, the number 4 rushing attack, the Rams, the number 5 rushing attack from last year, the Eagles, the number 7 rushing attack from last year, the Cardinals, the number 9 rushing attack from last year, the Dolphins, or number 10, the Bears. You need one of those true 1A guys.
Let me tell
I thought you
you.
were dancing.
You're literally making the argument that these teams didn't have a great running back, which means that they didn't have a great running back room. You're grading offensive lines. I don't. These teams have good offensive lines.
Frankie nails it.
Cardinals? The Cardinals?
So
The
what
Bills?
makes a good running game? Okay, let's move on. Let's move on.
Wait. This is a great idea for another show, and we're going to put a bottle cap on it so that it explodes in the group chat, and I'm sure that everyone will be talking about it for weeks to come, and then other podcasts will pick up on it and do a running back show based solely on this idea in itself. Don't steal it. I'm trademarking it. Let's move on to the most exciting part of tonight's show, and that's how strong the Denver Broncos tight end group is heading into 2024. Guys, they're aging out a little bit, but this is the perfect opportunity to see prime tight end play. A couple of these guys have been in the league long enough to where their blocking skills should have increased at this present point, but you have a question mark / landmine situation with a Greg Dulcich, who I have all but yet kind of given up this hopeful feeling. You guys all stopped for a second. I got scared. I thought I was frozen, but nope, just anxiety. But you've got a Lucas Kroll who can step up and actually make some waves this season. Sean Payton has been very complimentary of his ability to take advantage of the opportunity that is in front of him. And he's out there partaking in the tight end university run by Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Greg Olsen. So doing the work that's necessary, but I don't have a whole lot of anticipatory hope. But I assume that something has to happen here that is beneficial for this room as a whole. Joey's already started covering his face. He does not want to talk about this. He is beside himself. Let's go ahead. Joey, I'm going to have you start this conversation because you seem so overwhelmed by the concept of talking about tight ends here. I'm going to grade it, though, and I'm going to grade it at a D+. Because I don't see the vision here, and I think that's because there isn't one at the present moment. But my opinion could change very, very, very quickly once training camp starts.
Yeah, here's my thing: the Broncos have. Zach and I talked about this one day, and I tweeted this out like 2 years ago. The Broncos have had Jake Butt in different uniforms for a decade now. It's out of control. They've had
Joey,
Jeff Hireman, who's Jake Butt. They've had everybody's Jake Butt. All of them are. I
pulled up the list really quick. I just wanted to, because I was thinking this exact same point. Since 2010, a list of Broncos sides. I'll skip over some of the notable ones, but the ones that fit this archetype: Jacob Tamme, Jeff Hireman, Owen Daniels, Joel Dreesen, AJ Derby. Who remembers AJ Derby? Matt Lacoste, Adam Troutman, Eric Saubert. I'd say even Vernon Davis was a Jake Butt. Troy Fumagalli. Remember that Jake Butt? Nick Vanette. Andrew Beck. The Jake Butt.
That was a Jake Butt. Yeah. No, it's always been Jake Butt, but continue.
I know, but here's the crazy thing. Jake Butt, like he sits so present in the mind, is 24th on that list. All the guys I listed, he is the least receiving yards out of it. He has 11 more yards than Eric Tomlinson.
Yeah, he had a better year 4 years ago. He had a better year 4 years ago. It's always been Jake Butt. He just changed his last name. It's been the same dude. It's either Jeff Hireman or Jake Butt. I don't know. They're twins. Adam or Troutman? This guy is Hireman again. We're all talking about Jake Butt or Hireman. This is who the Broncos have at tight end. This has been their number one tight end since Julius Thomas. Julius Thomas has been the only guy who's not Jeff Hireman. I just felt the need to let the Broncos fans know. Might be different last names. It's all Jake Butt. That's what we have. Anyways, so I think this is the Broncos' worst position group. I'm usually more pessimistic, I'm usually more optimistic to the Broncos. And when we go through other position groups, you'll see I am. But the running back and tight end room, I think we just picked a show where Joey's going to be a little more negative. This pessimistic. This is the worst. This is the worst. This is the worst position group on the Broncos right here. I give this one a D-. Shout out to Jake Butt though.
Man, is it the worst? It might be. This or centers in the convo until we see something out of anybody. I might put center in number one. Inside linebacker, I think, is definitely in the con. But that was what never mind. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But
you do, but you're not going to.
I'm not going to. That was too much of a
I saw
tangent.
Alex Singleton fly up into this cloud bubble above your head. Back up.
Yeah, you know, because you know it's the truth. But on to tight end, I think I'm a little more, I think, optimistic about the room. I would also probably be with Bree at like D+, just because I think like the floor is very low. Again, just like looking at these stats, I think it's kind of crazy. I don't know how meaningful it is, but Adam Troutman had 204 yards in his 17 games. AJ Derby had double that in 15. Like, how non-productive Adam Troutman was last year for like a starting tight end, even amongst the also rans that the Broncos tight end room has been defined by. Like, it's most comparable to like what Troy Fumagalli did, who was like a blocking tight end, or like Eric Saubert, who was also a blocking tight end. And Troutman's a nothing tight end. Like, he's not really a like block first guy, or like we're talking about the whole McLaughlin Estime debate. Troutman's not going to be part of such a debate at tight end because he is, like very milquetoast. Just I don't know what is like his defining quality. That said, I think you know what, I'm going to take the Bree position from 2 years ago. And I'm going to be on the Greg Dulcich train when no one else is. I think we've gotten to, I've been thinking about it over this offseason, and maybe this is me falling prey to the offseason narratives or whatever. I just think we're probably making too big of a deal out of some really minor injuries. Like, he's a third round pick who really didn't play much. And so it makes sense that we're very quickly out on him. That's status quo for the NFL. Understandable. But God, is my Wi-Fi cutting out? I hope not. He did show some really questionable or really promising things, rather. Receiving yards per game, he's ahead of Julius Thomas among Broncos tight ends. So I think the again, small sample size, but the pros have been really positive. And then in terms of the injuries, it's a hamstring, which, yes, that lingers for a long time, but generally it's not a career ender. It's not like a guy has a hamstring linger for, it's like it can screw up a season. Or if you, but like, that's not what ruined KJ Hamler's career. If you remember, he jumped up for a ball in that one. I forget the opponent now. It wasn't the Colts game because he ended that one or finished that one, but he jumped up for the ball and landed horribly awkwardly on his one leg. And that's what kind of like ruined his career. We had a very serious injury. Javonte Williams, we just had, I guess we didn't dive, we spent all the time on McLaughlin, but I think the Broncos fans feel more positively about a Javonte Williams or a Caden Stearns in 2024, when both these guys have had much more concerning injuries than Greg Dulcich. Greg Dulcich has a foot thing, but it's not like, frankly, we're unclear about what it is. So maybe that's something that's scary. I was just trying to do research on it, and the Broncos have kept it in-house, which is troubling. But we're talking about 1 foot problem and a hamstring problem that lingered for a long time. And yes, concerning, absolutely. Odds are he probably doesn't work out, but I think we're too low now that we're just putting the nail in the coffin. I think there's real promise there still with Greg Dulcich, but maybe I'm crazy. I'm done.
Oh God,
I agree, but I'm not off the train. Like, there was hope, and there's ever present hope, but I think dwindling down it to just being some inconvenient hamstring issues, like the soft tissue aspect of it not healing, and then being a repetitive injury that continues to take him out of the ability to get any snaps and any NFL speed at that position, puts him at like a downturn trend of ever having the ability to be successful. And I don't think it's just NFL fans moving on because of where he was drafted and then dealing with injury problems, but I think it's concerning all around. That's the only reason where I'm like, I can't even put a lot of faith into it. Like, let's say if it was and it's not, and this is a terrible analogy, but if I had to bet on a racehorse, I'd be really scared. And it could be my absolute favorite bet here. Greg Dulcich had a really flash in a hot pan ability to turn the entire amount of Broncos country onto the bandwagon. And then it was forcefully taken away. And then it has never again picked up steam. And I think the momentum is out of there. And I think that, barring further injury, but it went from hamstring. And then your body has this terrible circumstance in where it tries to overcompensate in different parts of your body. And now it's a foot thing. So we don't know if it's the same leg. We don't know if it's muscular skeletal. We don't know if it's a plantar issue, which could spell long-term disaster for any type of skill player. So I think that's more of the emphasis on why I'm like really worried about what's going to come of that. And I've been very ever presently honest about my hesitations with Caden as well, just because that injury does scare me. And I do think this isn't the year that it's going to like bounce back entirely. So I'm like, I was giving you a funny look there, Zach, because I was like, this is, I love that you've gone in a different direction. It is more optimistic in general. And I think the off-season kind of lull has gotten to you. It's like when women give birth and their brain produces the type of chemicals that tells you it's really not that bad. And then you come back and you're like, oh no, it was really that bad. Like your body has sent pain receptors to yourself to convince you that everything is probably going to be okay. And I love the optimism towards the tight end room to counteract your positivity. Frankie Abbott is in the chat talking about it being the worst unit possibly in the state of the NFL as a whole. So there's that. Joey wants to touch on that subject. And Frankie, thank you for that comment. It made me laugh.
Yes. All I have to say, shout out Jake Butt. My boy's been on the team for damn near a decade at this point. Just wearing different numbers, and you know what? He's almost a Ring of Famer off the longevity alone. So shout out to Jake Butt. Shout out to you. That's all I got. I don't believe in Greg Dulcich at this point, and that's all. Shout out to Jake Butt. He's also on the Broncos this year, just with the last name Troutman.
And I'll say I don't think that Dulcich is going to be a superstar or anything. I don't even think he's going to have I don't know what it's going to be. I do think people are too low on him right now. Again, Troutman was such a zero in the passing game last year. And maybe it is about Kroll. We should talk about Kroll, son. Maybe it is Kroll. I think it's wide open for either Kroll or Dulcich to surprise and become the number one in that room. Because Troutman is like a wet fish. I don't know, like or a dead fish. Like I don't know what to say. Cold fish. I don't know. He's unexpired. He's like a pickled fish. I'll go with that. I don't know what I'm going with this analogy, but unappealing, uninspired. Yeah, that's probably where I'm going. Troutman. But I think it'll take very little to beat him out. And if Dulcich can have a pulse and granted, we haven't seen him play almost at all in his NFL career. So it is a big if. But I think, and I'm guilty of this myself, for much of this offseason, I've not even considered him as part of the tight end room because he hasn't gotten on the field. But if he is healthy for any portion of the season, maybe it is half the season, he is comfortably the best tight end in this room, unless Lucas Kroll really proves something. So I don't think we should just completely cross him out from our views of the Broncos roster. Because if he's at all healthy, I think he probably leads this team in receiving yards from the tight end position, unless Kroll breaks out.
I think Kroll is the most promising tight end the Broncos have. I think I know what I have from Troutman. I've said this here on this podcast before. If you're trying to sign those tight ends that do a little of everything, what does that mean? That means that they really don't do anything. That's what that means. You either get the blocking one that I think is good at blocking, or you get the receiving one. When you try to do the little in between, I got a guy that does a little of everything. That means they don't do anything. I've seen it. That's where the Broncos keep getting Jake Butt over and over again. That's
so why is that? Okay, I'm going to challenge that, because then why does the conversation always come back to this tight end can't block worth shit? And then you guys are just ramming into them week after week about their inability to block, but they're doing well in the receiving game. But then the conversation comes back to they're not blocking. Zach.
I'm not the one.
I think tight end blocking at this point is almost more of a scheming thing than like a lot of it is talent too. There's absolutely tight ends that are like difference making blockers, but you can roll your eyes all you want, Joey. Look at what the Dolphins are doing with some absolute
No.
blockers.
I agree. I'm thinking back to our Brock Bowers conversations, but continue. Anyways, that's why I rolled my eyes. But keep going.
I was a big Bowers fan.
Tonight.
It ended up that way, but
you are.
Oh, Albert Okwuegbunam is a little bit soft in the block. Let's not give him an opportunity. Ooh, no offense. He's not up to speed in the blocking capability. You guys. All right.
I mean, they also just weren't good football players.
yeah, I mean, Alberto.
That was kind of their problem. Like I don't know what to tell you. Alberto is like, what did he do since the Broncos traded him to the Eagles? He got cut. Like and then Noah Fant is okay. They threw him into a Russell Wilson trade that went horribly wrong. But if that trade wasn't like one of the worst trades in NFL history and took like the route that most people were expecting, which was that Russell Wilson would at least be a fine quarterback, you live with the Noah Fant trade.
He was playing well with the Seahawks. Let's not get it twisted. There was the growth potential that we saw from year 4 to 5. It happened. We missed out. Frankie says they don't invest anything into the position, and I think that we can end that conversation on that note. It's appropriate. Frankie, kudos to you for your comment here. I think we can all agree. On that note, super depressing. Zach has another point he'd like to make. It's probably
I'm wrong.
About Beck.
Shout out to Alberto. Zach, you were completely wrong. He had one target in a 42-19 loss against the 49ers. I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway.
You know what? I should have remembered because I was at the parade.
Get fucked. All right. Wednesday.
Oh, shoot. Sorry about that. That went horribly wrong. I didn't think it'd be that blown up. But Lucas Kroll, look at that RAS score. I thought it'd show up in the bottom thing first. I'm sorry. Everybody.
Thank you.
Like,
I really appreciate that.
We're just this this show went off without a hitch until the final few moments. And on that note, I'll leave you with this parting words. Nobody died, so it was fine. Thursday, Friday show will be fun. Guys, what are you doing on Friday's show? Or Thursday show? Talk about it. I don't care. Do whatever.
Oh shit. I'm sorry, Joey. You go.
I said take it away, Zach Seegers.
Oh, I will take it away. We're tier ranking the Broncos. We're gonna finish doing that. That was a fun show last time. We went through the first half. I'll try and get the thing open here really quick. This is what it looked like last week. We got all these guys. We got DT up top, Derek Wolfe in the A tier, Bradley Roby, Garrett Bowles in B. Joey disagrees with it pretty strongly. We were talking about a pre-show. He was giving me the business for it. And then we still have a whole second half to talk about with like Joey's favorite player of all time, Ryan Clady, Surtan's in there, Benito's in there, Tim Tebow's in there.
He disagreed with your first tiered list. He was just like vehemently against it.
He really disagreed. He did not like Cutler in the C tier. He didn't like Bradley Chubb in the C tier. He didn't like Mims in C or Judy in D, I think was part of it. There's a lot he didn't like. We'll dive into it. I think it's I had a lot of fun last week. I'm going to be excited to do it again with Joey yelling at me this week.
Yeah, Zach, this was atrocious. Tune in to the next show on Friday to hear why it's atrocious. Anyways,
go in on him. You get him. You tell him what's up. Give him the business. Give him all that smoke.
I don't have to. Picture. We can all see it. Anyways.
All right. We'll catch you next time.